Welcome to the Power of Nature podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Waldo. In this show, I talk about how nature and the natural world can communicate with us, how it can communicate directly and individually with each of us, and how this can create immeasurable benefits for us in our lives. I share stories of my experiences doing this as part of a regular and ongoing practice, and I talk to others about their experiences with the power of nature as well. So join me as we go on a journey of learning about the power of nature, how it can communicate directly with us, and the impact that it can have on our own lives. Welcome back to the Power of Nature podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking about a lot of things. I'm talking about animals or nature versus man. I don't really think of it as versus, but I kind of want to talk about that concept. And I want to talk about the Telepathy Tapes, which is a podcast that seems to have gotten a lot of attention. And I want to talk about what I talk all about in this show. What is at the core of what I talk about in this show, and really in all of my shows. But this show has a particular focus on nature. So let's go ahead and dive in. Where to begin? I guess I will begin by sharing how I have a son who was assigned a topic for a class to speak about. Was assigned the topic of what makes animals different from humans. And I have a lot of opinions on this. I'm an animal lover. I have studied the energy of all kinds of animals, domesticated and wild. I've had a lot of interactions, and I communicate with them. Not just in the traditional ways, but in kind of what might be considered non-traditional ways. And I talk about a lot of those things in this show, and I talk about what that means to me. But I want to kind of shed some more light on it, because sometimes when you do something just innately, sometimes you kind of don't even really know what you're doing, and until you kind of like realize that not everybody sees it the same way or has had the same experiences yet. So that's kind of what I want to get into. So my son was working on his assignment for school. And he ran us, my husband and I, through a version of it. And, you know, his articulation of the subject and his writing on it was really strong and all of that. But there were points being made in it that I, really don't agree with. And that's because one of the requirements of the class is to cite kind of traditional, conventional, well-known, quote unquote, research-based, more accepted knowledge on the topic. And so that's what he did. But there's a whole lot more. So he was talking about things like, the differences between animals and humans have to do with like thinking ability and morality and some things like that, which These are very conventional arguments that have been given. And so for the assignment, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be shared for this assignment, not anyone's, other perspective, right? So, but I want to offer some other perspectives because it was hard for me to hear that and not kind of on the inside kind of start screaming. And I brought some of those things up to him, and he's like, yeah, but, that's like some of my positions are not stuff that there's just an endless supply of verifiable mainstream media quotes about, which is kind of my point. What I talk all about in this show and what I have experienced through my life is, first just being drawn to nature and natural things and animals because, animals, oh, they're soft and fuzzy. Animals, oh, you have a pet. Oh, you see something in the wild. Oh, it's pretty, or, oh, you go out and yeah, you kind of feel a little more peaceful after you've gone for a walk or whatever. That is kind of what first drew me. And there's a lot of conventional science that talks about, hug your dog or your cat. Having a pet reduces your whatever stress level. And I could get into all the scientific terms, but I'm not going to do that. Going out into nature is a beneficial thing for stress reduction and for just slowing down and all of that. And that is kind of where a lot of the conventional wisdom is at. But in this show, and what I have learned, is that it is far more significant than that. And this is what I talk about, these stories that I've talked about, the trees teaching me things and animals teaching me things. Those are things that, I haven't just made up. I've experienced them and I've lived them. And when you experience something and you come to know it, you come to trust it differently than something that you've just read or something someone has told you. And what I've experienced is how, I started to go into nature, started to connect with animals, initially based on, kind of those other things. But as I started to do that more, I started to have other experiences. And this is what this show is all about, that, we may come to nature, under the guise of these kind of common or widely accepted perspectives on, nature is good for you, animals good for you. But it's so much more than that. And that's what I try to get at in the show. But what do I mean by it's so much more than that? Well, what's not being said that I've come to understand and I've come to believe, and this is what I've experienced, is that and I've gone down a lot of wrong paths of trying to understand this more, not wrong paths, but learning it in a bunch of different ways. But basically, at our core is our inner self. I talk about this in all of my shows, including this one, but more so in my other podcasts, that we have an inner self, and that inner self is communicating with us. That is what I believe is, this pure energetic source of us. It is our energy. It is our creative power. I talk about this. And nature in the natural world also has that at its source, at its core. It is actually what it is. It is an expression of that. It is a manifestation. I don't like to use that word because it's been so taken in directions that I don't agree with anymore. But it's a creation of this energy. That's what I believe nature is. It's a creation of this energy, this source, this energy, this power that creates all natural things. So nature and wildlife and animals live in accordance with this. Now, our domesticated animals have been trained and or have adapted to kind of rely more on us humans. And so there is a different, it's like almost like a couple of layers that, I don't want to say prevent it, but kind of prevent them from accessing their true nature-oriented instincts, right? I mean, we see this in dogs. You know, a dog is trained to do something that may or may not align with its own nature and natural instincts because it's been trained by humans to do that. Or it's been bred, you know, and through training has been taught to do that. But to me, at the source of all of nature, natural things, and at the source of us is this same stuff, is this same energy, is this same source. And what I have discovered and experienced, you know, is that my inner self is that same stuff. And what's at the core of the tree that I'm looking at as I'm looking out my window is that as well. And so they're in sync. They're like in sync, in alignment, in harmony. And that is why when I go into nature, from that standpoint, it's like it reminds me of who I truly am at my core. And my own inner self really will often use nature because it is so natural and of this essential same source to help me kind of get back to my own true nature, if you will. And what I'm talking about with me is I'm talking about the lens through which I'm looking at the world. So there's me, my inner self, which has, it's like my highest source. And then there's me, where my kind of awareness and consciousness and perspective is right now in what I'm choosing to engage in, or where I've been in my own awareness of myself. And they can be in different places, and they can be in different places at different times. So I can wake up and feel really in sync with my own inner self. I can feel really in sync with who I am, and that can be wonderful. And I can also, often I find as I go through my day and I have more experiences with other people, with our institutions, with our culture, etc., I can kind of fall back into, if you will, older perspectives that I've kind of moved beyond, but I haven't completely moved beyond. And it's almost like they kind of pull me back and then I get confused. Well, going out into nature can help me with that because nature is purely this energetic source. And what I have found is that, you know, connecting with wildlife, connecting with trees, with mountains, going out as a practice without having lots of expectations, or really any expectations is really the best, means we're not hindering that communication of nature to us. We're not blocking it. We're not restricting how it can come to us. We're being open. And what I find is that is what benefits me the most. When I go out, and I talked about this in episode 23, I think it was, just get out into nature and drop all these expectations and needs for certain gear in certain places and whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with nice gear. There's nothing wrong with going to nice places. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But when you make that a requirement, it's like you're putting a bunch of limitations on what you actually can experience in terms of benefits from nature. And many of us do that. I know I certainly have. It's like I disconnect from the communication with nature because I'm distracted by the gear, or am I in the right place, or whatever. It's like I'm distracted by all this noise in my head that has come from not really the true me, not really my inner self. And it's creating a disconnect with what I actually can experience in nature. So how does this tie into my son and his writing or his assignment? Well, I think there's a lot of this perspective that I have is not, the most common out there. I know if I had heard this perspective, if I wasn't me and I heard someone named Michelle talking about this stuff a number of years ago, I would have been like, what? Like, I don't get it. And it's because I was kind of like listening more to what is out there versus my inner self. My inner self did get it, and it started calling me to understand more about this kind of stuff. But back then I wouldn't have really been in the place where I am now. And this is what I've found a lot with what I would call conventional knowledge, conventional awareness, where the majority or a lot of people or our cultural institutions or our culture is at a certain place. And it's not a good or bad place. It's just a step on the journey of becoming more aware of our own true selves, our own true source, the creative power, this endless energy that we have in us. I really believe that is what we are all doing. That is the journey that, I believe that we are on in this life. Should we choose to engage in it, because we don't have to. It is up to us. It is a free will decision. But what I have found is that when I do choose to engage and I use my free will and my choice, I find that I start feeling these benefits, like I said, sometimes surface benefits initially. I don't want to say surface, but like, oh yeah, I feel better, or something feels soft or pretty or comforting or whatever. And then I start doing it more, and I start having more benefits and more benefits and more benefits. And this is pretty much the journey that I've been on. It's like I started to kind of just happen to do something in nature or connecting with animals, and I found that it served me, so then I did it more, and then I found that served me, so then I did it more, and then I started doing it more and more intentionally and consciously, to the point where now I talk all about how I do this as an ongoing practice. I actually consciously and intentionally engage with nature, and I engage with my inner self, and opening up a line of communication for my inner self to whatever my current awareness lens is at the moment. And I, try to open up to listen to that. And it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing practice. Sometimes I do it well, and sometimes I, fall off the boat, so to speak, and I feel really not good for a while, and then I kind of find my way back. And this is the journey that I've been on. But what this has to do with my son's assignment is, I think there's a lot of kind of like common knowledge out there, or popular knowledge out there that is limited. It's not, how do I explain this? Like, people sense when they go into nature and they have a moment of where they feel the benefits of it. But it can be so easy to kind of get distracted by all this other stuff. And I think that what can help with that is starting to realize that there is more to it than just this, like, the limited perspective that our common perceptions have, right? Like, that's why I'm creating this podcast, to share that there is a world of other experiences that we can have, awareness, and it's really an awareness and allowing of our own creative power that we can start to engage in even more actively when we become aware of the possibilities. And that's, a part of why I have all of my podcasts, and part of why I have this podcast in particular, because I think nature is such a powerful way. It's been a powerful way for me. It continues to be. I learn things in nature every single day. I have amazing experiences in nature every single day. And I do it where I live in this beautiful place in Montana now, but I did it also when I lived in a place that seemed like it was, not even like very natural and very man-made. And I had to kind of like search around for something that was natural, but I still could engage in it. It is all around us. And it is within us. How this ties into the Telepathy Tapes, if you've heard, it's this podcast that has kind of taken it seems like it's gotten kind of popular overnight. And what it is was created by a documentary person who discovered, I think it was a scientist, or she discovered on her own. Somehow she caught wind that there are these non-verbal kids, or sometimes adults with autism, that are nonverbal. They don't speak. And what happened is there's this awareness that they started to realize that these kids were each somehow communicating with other nonverbal kids through what they call what is called on the show more a telepathy, and a telepathic means, and these, the show goes on to talk about this, interview a bunch of the parents that are experiencing this, interviewing the parents of how the parents, I listened to like maybe one episode, but interviewing the parents, talking about the parents or family members, how once they started to find a way to communicate through nonverbal means with their nonverbal kids with autism, that they started to realize that these kids also could connect into their thoughts and know what they're thinking. So again, kind of like telepathy. So it's like kind of like being able to do that, and then also being able to communicate with other nonverbal kids that are nowhere. It's not about going to a set place and doing it. They can do this just from their homes, from all different kinds of geographic places. And this has really kind of been a subject of a lot of conversation, and wonder, and really beautiful experiences for the family members and the parents of the nonverbal kids or adults, whatever their age are, to be able to realize the amazing communication that's actually happening between themselves and their family member, and that their family member, the nonverbal family member, is also able to communicate with other nonverbal people. So it's a beautiful, beautiful sharing of this information. It really is. And I don't have a nonverbal kid, but I almost did. My son had been diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech when he was younger, and he was able to make some sounds, but initially I was told that he would not speak. He now speaks a lot and sometimes says a lot of things I don't really want him to say, but that's a different conversation. Teenager stuff. But, I remember what it was like when all the other kids were talking and my kid wasn't, and just so desperately wanting communication. And I can't even imagine, what it must be like for parents that have that. They have a nonverbal child or family member, or family members who have a family member that's nonverbal, and, discovering this ability to communicate. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful, because I know what it was like when I found kind of like some of the keys by listening to my own inner self, which guided me to how to find the keys to help my son. And I know what that felt like. But the thing I want to share is kind of like adding to the picture of what I have learned, which is that, this is not some special voodoo thing that only these nonverbal kids can do. That's what I've come to see. I really have come to believe that these nonverbal kids and adults, I believe, this is my take on it. This is what I've kind of been shown and become aware of. And you can agree with this or not, it doesn't matter. But I really have come to believe that people in that category that are nonverbal, there's some way in which they are, it's like their experience is a gift to wake people up to what is the potential for all of us. And sometimes it takes a lot of noise to wake people up to what is the potential for all of us. Sometimes we don't believe stuff until it kind of seems really loud or extreme, or things really get our attention. And I know that's been my experience. Sometimes I just don't wake up to something until the world kind of like takes me kicking and screaming to it. Cause I don't know. I'm part Irish, part Italian. I'm stubborn. So, there's that. But what I want to express in this show that I think is, something I'm going to be talking more about, and I talk more about it in all my shows really, is whether you use the word telepathy or something else, I have come to believe and realize and to know, like fully know, not because someone showed me some science, but to know in the way that maybe these parents on the telepathy tapes have come to know what their kid does because they see it and they experience it and they know it. I've come to know that what is being called telepathy on this show is not some special thing that it's a wonderful thing, but it's not something that is only limited to certain people. That it is actually something we all are able to do. We all have always been able to do. And yet, what I feel like has stopped us from knowing that we could do it are kind of like a bunch of other beliefs and perceptions and confusion and cultural history that kind of closes us down to be open to new things, fear, false evidence appearing real. All of those things have stopped us from becoming aware of what it is that we actually all can do. And I don't mean can like we need to go off and train with someone to do it. I mean, it is innate in us. And the only learning that we really need to do is almost like an unlearning of the stuff that, or a letting go and a releasing of the stuff that isn't true, that isn't real, that is stopping us from what is real and what is the truth of what we are and what we can do. And that's really at the heart of this entire show. What I do with nature is the same premise, or it's built on the same foundation as what these, adult or kid, nonverbal, lovely people are doing. They just don't have kind of as much noise, if you will. And this is something I can talk a lot more about. I don't want to make this a long episode. I want to just kind of introduce this, but they don't have as much, often as much noise. But really, we each of us has in our full power the ability to direct our focus and our energy to, it's not that we turn off the noise in a way, that we force the noise not to exist, that we shut it down. It is that our own focus is so powerful that we can direct our focus to our inner self, and in doing so, the noise that can stop us from communicating in this way becomes irrelevant. And when that happens, we start being able to tune into the same kind of like channel of energy and communication, and knowing a communication pathway and information as other people, nature, including animals, and all kinds of things. That's really what's happening. And I talk about this. I have 2 horse-related podcasts. The one, Riding from the Inside Out, listening to our horses and ourselves. I talk about this in relationship to horses. because I think a lot of horse people have developed such advanced connections with their horses. If they have a true, like, really heart-centered passion for their horses. Same thing with any animal, really. It doesn't have to be a horse. I mean, I have this with so many animals. My relationship with horses is its own thing, but I have this with every animal. But it's this attunement that is, I often say with horses, it's like when you tune into your inner self, you're tuning into the same thing that the horse is already living in. And when you get into that same place, you are in alignment, and that is where an amazing potential for connection can happen. And this is something I actually learned to do as a little kid. I learned to ride a pony and do really cool things with a pony that seemed kind of like untrainable. And yet I didn't have any training, or I didn't have anybody kind of coaching me to do it. And it was because I did what I just described. It's like I connected in to the same thing that was at the root of the pony. But that's exactly what I'm talking about in the show also, that always happens, is doing that with birds, with trees, with the wind, with sky, with weather, with fog, with anything nature oriented, wildlife, natural, because those things are pure in their allowing of their connection to their source. And when we begin to be more open and we begin to want to have experiences, and realize that there are benefits of connecting with nature and benefits of, or just kind of what we're capable of as people, we start to realize we can do a whole lot of things that are very different from what we thought we could do. And that's really what this show and all of my podcasts are all about. I'm always amazed when I listen to my inner self or I listen to the wisdom of nature, and the things that I learn kind of blow my mind, because they kind of seem to defy what seems like what I thought was possible or logical. And this happens over and over again. And isn't that kind of what I'm talking about with the show, the Telepathy Tapes? I mean, here, the scientist is proving and showing, and the documentary podcast creator is, supporting this whole kind of like study to make sure there's no trickery going on or whatever, but they're proving that these kids are talking to their family members non-verbally, and having accuracy, and they're also talking to each other. And I don't need scientific research to believe that myself, because I live it. I've experienced it. And what I'm talking about in the show and on all my podcasts, when I talk about tuning into your inner self and or tuning into nature, it is that same kind of like source of energy that is allowing these nonverbal kids to communicate with each other and with their loved ones, that is also available to you to communicate with your own inner self, which knows everything about what you want and who you are and where you want to go, and can guide you in all of that, as well as nature itself, which, working in conjunction with your inner self, can teach us just the most amazing things. I mean, I've learned the most amazing things that have been beneficial through my connection and relationship with nature. And that's why I have a podcast about all of this. So I'm sure this is something I could go on and on and on and on about, because it's what I will go on and on and on more about in this show and in all of my podcasts. But I wanted to just kind of state this as a bit of the tip of the iceberg, and share, what I've come to understand about all of this, and really the big message that I want to be heard is that I know that this is something that everyone actually can do. This is not some special thing that only a selected people can do. And it's also not something that you need to go to someone to be taught how to do it. There's a lot of that happens in the world. You don't have to come to me to learn how to connect with your inner self. That's not why I talk about what I talk about. And you don't need to listen to my podcast to connect with nature in this way. I'm just sharing my experiences with it. And if it's helpful and it inspires you on your journey, awesome. And if it doesn't, go find something that does. More importantly, yourself. Tune into yourself, because that is where the connection begins. So, like I said, I could go on and on about this, but I'm not going to do that, and I'm gonna leave it at that for today's episode. Until the next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Power of Nature podcast. To learn more about me and my other offerings, you can visit my website at michellewaldo.com. That's MICHELLEWALDO.com.